Okay.
I will start recording. Thank you all for joining again. We are here with Game Day host Rece Davis ahead of our show at Clemson. We will get started with David Hood.
Hey, Rece, always good to talk to you. Same question I asked Holly, is that it's been since 2016 since there's been an actual game day out on Bowman Field. Everybody remembers sloppy body guy, crazy background out there with Tillman and the bells in the background. Hey, for you get to go to a lot of great locations. How excited are you to get back out on Bowman Field for the first time in 6 years and kind of see this Clemson crowd again?
I'm really happy to be here. They've always given us a great environment, a great crowd in my 8 years on the show, and it has been a long time since we've been here, if memory serves. Well, obviously, we were here 15 for Notre Dame and then 16 for the Lamar Jackson game, which was, which I'm sure to Clemson people said a Deshaun Watson game, but Lamar was sensational that night. It was a great game. Came down to a couple of inches and just a perfect environment for the entire day, from the game day crowd that morning to the environment in Death Valley that night. So we're fired up to be here. I think two things really work well for the environment of the show. One is to go to a place where we've never been and they're excited to have us. And the other is to go to a traditional power with a passionate fan base where, for whatever reason, the show hasn't been in a few years. And this certainly fits the bill of national power, where we probably are a little bit overdue for getting back here. So we're fired up about it. And it'll be a great environment on Saturday morning.
Clemson obviously has that great entrance that you've seen many times, but it's changed a little bit this year. The stadium goes dark and the orange lights flash. Are you, is there any part of you that's like, yeah, I can't wait to see that too and kind of see how this kind of unfolds? And do you guys have plans to cover this in a little different way?
Well, I'm sure I'm not calling the game, so I'm not privy to know exactly how they're going to do the entrance. I would imagine they will. That's something that's sort of catching on around college football, and it's really cool. I think, sort of speaking bigger picture here, one of the things that is a challenge for athletic departments is how to make the game experience inside the stadium something that you can't replicate on television, because the television experience is pretty good and you don't have to drive 2 hours after the game. You don't have to sit in traffic. You don't have to deal with the weather. So you have to make the game experience inside the stadium something that you can't replicate at home. The light shows, the way it builds the energy that you see a lot of places and that Clemson is implementing now is one way to do that. So I think it'll be really cool, certainly for a big game. First time these two have met as top 10 opponents, and North Carolina State's first top 10 matchup ever, which is, kind of surprising. I mean, I know that they're not a traditional juggernaut, but they've had really good teams and they've had some highly ranked teams, and to be going into this type of game for the first time in program history gives it a little juice, and probably adds a little juice for the home team also with a top 10 opponent coming in.
Hey, Rece, this is Grayson Mann from ClemsonSportsNews.com. I wanted to ask you the same question I asked Holly about this rivalry with NC State. How do you feel that it's evolved over time, with the 2016 game going wide right, or Bradley Chubb and Kelly Bryant with the towel? Feels like this has really caught the nation's eye. And how does that help you focus a narrative for Saturday's show with a game like this and as highly contested as it can be?
Well, it's come a long way from being the Textile Bowl, right? I mean, the trophy that no one knows about, in college football. So I think that anytime that you have really good teams playing for high stakes, that it gives a little juice to the rivalry. The fact that these two have played a lot over the years, and games that have largely, historically speaking, I mean, dating back the last 50, 60 years or even before that it's largely been a regional thing. But when you have top 10 opportunities, then it becomes more of a national rivalry, and it does capture a little bit more attention. And I think that certainly helps us in terms of presentation. But to be completely candid and fair about it, in the eyes of the majority of average college football fans, if there is any such thing, there's only one national power in this game, and that's Clemson. NC State is an upstart. I've mentioned a couple of times they haven't played in a game like this, let alone haven't won a game like this. They haven't won a conference championship since the 70s. we got in a little debate in the meeting this morning about what Clemson's real coming of age moment was. And I know a lot of people point to that LSU bowl game, Peach Bowl back in the day. I think it was the Notre Dame game, the bring your own guts game. Not that they weren't good before then, they certainly were. But that was the first year in the modern era, post 84, post 81, that they would go on to play for the national championship. They were not the higher ranked team, if memory serves, on that night against Notre Dame. That was a landmark milepost moment for Clemson in its ascension to the ethereal realm of college football under Dabo. That game, the Notre Dame game at home, it's not a home game, but this is that type of moment from North Carolina State. And I think just because North Carolina State has a 10 beside its name, that gives it a little juice, but there's still skepticism about whether they truly belong in that type of conversation. They'll have the opportunity to prove that Saturday night. And I think that too is compelling drama, is do you have a team that can take a step to borrow from Dave Clawson and go from good to great? North Carolina State's been good, really. They haven't just been good. They've been really good under Dave Doran. They haven't been great. This is an opportunity to prove they can be great. And that, I think that sells as much as anything.
Hey, Rece, my name is Mitchell Summers. I'm with Fox Carolina. Thank you so much for your time.
Am I allowed to talk to him, Julie? I'm kidding.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding.
He gets one question. That's it.
I'm kidding.
My first question, I was wondering, just kind of generally overall, what are some of the beats that you guys are trying to hit with covering this game?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Bears talking down here. Say that again, please.
I was wondering, overall, generally speaking, what are some of the beats that you are trying to cover with this game?
I mean, we've got a great story on Brian Brezee's sister. Dabo's going to join us on the set. We'll have what I think something we've been talking about since the off season. When we do our breakdowns at the Zotron board, we've done that. But what we talked about being able to do this year is kind of do a point counterpoint back and forth. If you do that, I would do this. Using the schemes of the teams involved. Kirk and David are going to do that Saturday morning and kind of go back and forth on some of the breakdowns. This is how I would defend this. I do need to make sure, though, as you say that, make sure I've got the right game. We're doing that. I just got to make sure it's about this game. Let me. I'm sure it is. But let me double check. Oh no, I'm sorry. So scratch all of that. That's about the Ole Miss Kentucky game. As soon as I started telling you that, I started thinking, I think that's Ole Miss Kentucky. That's something that we'll be doing on the outside, though, is they'll be doing point counterpoint. Obviously, we'll have XO breakdowns about what's gone wrong for North Carolina State's offense, because it hasn't been very good, surprisingly so. And then Clemson's defense and the defensive pass interference penalties, and whether North Carolina State with its young receivers can take some shots at those corners and be as effective either with completions or with DPIs as Wake Forest was last week. So, those are some of the things that we'll be hitting.
Yeah, one of the first things.
There's a lot going on in my head right now, Mitchell. I don't have the rundown completely memorized yet.
I understand. You guys have a crazy day ahead of you. I completely understand. So my other question, I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning the story on Brian Brzee, and it's something that galvanizes a team. When one of their own is hurting so much. And I was wondering, how much have you noticed over your many different teams that you've seen, many different amazing stories? How much does a story like this kind of bring a team together and maybe galvanize them for what could be happening in the future?
It certainly can be a rallying cry. And I think the one thing I would say that it does is that it helps check any selfishness. Now, Clemson's been really good over the years about not having a lot of that in the program. But I think anytime you have a real tragedy of a human nature affect one of your teammates, that if you start worrying too much about something that just affects you, number of snaps, playing time, not getting the ball, not whatever it might be, I think it can really help anybody as humans to sort of check themselves and have a little perspective on it. And this is speaking generally. It's not speaking about Clemson per se. because as I said, I don't think Clemson's had a lot of that in its program over the years. But I do think that it's really true in any walk of life. I mean, you might say to yourself, well, why shouldn't I complain about this? You know, about not getting the ball, about not getting the snaps. They said, I'm not being treated the way I want to be. And, you know, you might be right about that. Fair enough. But I think when you have a human tragedy like this and you see somebody you care about hurting, it can help you temper those feelings and maybe be more inclined to put the good of the group and the good of others ahead of that. And that can be a galvanizing thing for a team in terms of the way it plays.
Hey, Rece, Chapel Fowler with the State Newspaper. Thanks for doing this. What do you remember about the first time you met Dabo Swinney, whenever that was, and what's kind of your assessment of how long he's, been able to keep Clemson at this high level going into year 14 or 15?
It's one of the amazing stories. I would imagine, I don't recall specifically, I would imagine I met Dabo while he was coaching at Alabama or something, or playing at Alabama maybe. But really, I think probably the first time I remember he was still coaching for Tommy, because Tommy and I were very friendly. And, I'd become friendly with Tommy, when he was an assistant coach at Auburn, and, sort of followed him, followed his career and kept in touch at Tulane and so forth. So, kind of, I wouldn't say got to know Dabo then, but that was my first meeting. So I don't have any great story about first meeting with Dabo. I think just sort of seeing the way he's been able to grow and evolve and sustain and be genuine has been really impressive and really, a remarkable thing. He just hasn't changed in terms of personality a lot. And this is the type of job that changes a lot of people, almost in some cases, almost by necessity, because of the demands on their time. And, is it harder to get to him now than it was in, 2012? Yeah, probably. But, he's still an accessible guy and still a genuine guy. So I think, he's already the greatest coach in Clemson history, all due respect to the great coaches here, including the great Danny Ford. But, what he's built here and the juggernaut program that he's built that has sustained year after year is really, really impressive, spectacular.
Hey, Rece, Trevor Groves, CUTigers.com. Thanks for doing this. Clemson has a chance to win a 37th straight home game, tying Florida State for the longest streak in ACC history. Also, 11 straight 10-win seasons, which is second only to Florida State and Alabama with 14. Alabama has a chance to tie or pass that this year. But I'm just curious, did you ever think, especially with regard to the home win streak, did you ever think that anyone in the ACC would touch that record? And how does this run compare with some of the other great streaks in history, like Miami back in the 80s?
It's really an impressive streak, and probably not, because Florida State was so dominant in the ACC really from the time they joined the conference in '92, really until Clemson sort of unseated them, I guess, even though Florida State certainly had a little bit of a dip at the end of the Bobby Bowden era, but, for the most part, they were the juggernaut all the way up until the time Clemson took over. So I think it's as impressive as what Florida State was able to do. They have put together the same number of national championships in the era. I know that, Florida State had another one in 2013, but, it's, I think the first thing you do to build a program is beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and not have the face plants, the inexplicable losses to teams that you're better than. And those have been rare, the rarest of occasions for Clemson, particularly at home. And I think that's the one of the most underrated marks of sustaining greatness in a program is, do you beat the people you're supposed to beat all the time, or 99.9% of the time? And Clemson has done that, and it's manifested itself in this home winning streak, which certainly I think ranks up there with with what Florida State did. And if I recall, I think Miami's went into the 50s. So let's give Clemson a few more seasons to get that home winning streak up the way the Hurricanes had it back in the day. But certainly it's a really, really impressive run.
Thanks, Rece.
You bet.
Hey, Rece, thank you for taking the time. I'm watching game day week 1 when you guys are in Columbus and Lightning forces you to move into that pretty constrained space in the lobby of the arena. I'm just curious, obviously the forecast is starting to shape up much better for this weekend, but how cognizant are you of the weather as the week goes along? And now that it looks like it's going to be much better than what was anticipated, what's the excitement level like of being able to do game day in the place it's intended to be?
We're very grateful for that, and really extraordinarily grateful to our crew. We have people forget sometimes, or I won't say forget, they don't realize that we have probably, when it's all said and done, 100 people, that are responsible for doing their part on the show. A great number of those people are our truck drivers, the people who construct the set, who put up the screens, who do some really hard work and some pretty remarkable things in an extraordinarily short period of time. And they were in limbo a little bit this week because we weren't sure that we were going to be able to do that. And if they were going to be able to do so safely, which was the first principle for us, is make sure that, that they were safe. So it's great that we're able to do it. We do have a backup plan that is better than the Ohio State situation, simply because the Ohio State deal sort of came out of nowhere, and it was, and I still to this day haven't seen any lightning. I know it was there, and because they said it was there, but I didn't see any. And with this, we kind of know what the forecast is, and we know what we're up against, and we have a backup plan. And I'm grateful for our crew that has done the hard work to get things ready and able to do so safely. Also grateful we had really good leadership that employed some patience here to say, let's wait. Let's not bail on this. Let's not decide we're going inside for sure. And I think that's going to pay off with a great scene, even if it's a little bit rainy, because as we referenced earlier, one of the great scenes in my 8 years on the show was when we were doing it in the middle of a monsoon and a quagmire before the Clemson Notre Dame game in 15.
We'll finish up with Mitchell now.
Hey, Rece, Mitchell, one more time. I'm asking so many questions as the Fox guy. I'm sorry.
Don't call yourself a Fox guy. You're better than that. I'm kidding. That's off the record. It was a joke. I've got friends there. I'm just joking.
I understand. Okay, so if you look at the numbers going through the first 4 games, Clemson's got that explosive offense that everyone was used to under the Taj Boyd, the Deshaun Watsons, the Trevor Lawrences. And when we were talking with Holly, I was asking about this, and kind of something she was talking about was this is kind of a test in a sense. Obviously, it's a top 10 matchup. That's going to be a test in and of itself. But it's a test to kind of show that, hey, Clemson is kind of back to the Clemson they were, not last year's Clemson. So do you kind of see it as a similar way of like, this is a great test for these guys to go out and show that what that was last year, we are this explosive, high-powered offense one more time?
I mean, they're doing what Uiagalelei does best, right? He's got a big arm and they're throwing the ball down the field. I mean, he's averaging like 12 yards per attempt. I think he leads the nation in completions on throws that have traveled 20 yards, or actually maybe leads the Power 5 and throws that have traveled 20 yards or so in the air. That's what he does best, right? He can run, he can power run, but he doesn't scare anyone running the way some of the other guys have. I think they've tweaked the offense a little bit in terms of what they've accentuated within their offense that plays to his strengths. And, I don't know that he has to prove it necessarily, but or that they have to prove it necessarily. But it is a test, because this is going to be the best defense they faced by a long shot. I mean, they've got NC State has an elite linebacking core, elite, and they've got a lot of guys who are really veterans on that side of the ball. So it's clearly the biggest test. Can NC State get pressure on him? And if they've kept him in the pocket, he's not as good outside the pocket. DJ, I mean, can NC State force him out of the pocket, or can they not? And if Clemson is able to sort of control the way the game is played, and put up those, 20, 25-yard completions, especially the way they did last week, then I think you start to say, okay, they figured some things out on offense. They are explosive the way they have been in the past. But I do think it's a pretty high bar right now. So let's wait and see how it looks against a really good defense. But at the same time, if they don't run up and down the field, but they play effectively, let's not sell the Wolfpack short. Their defense is really, really good. I mean, it's, I think, 7th in the country in defensive efficiency. And, so this is a challenge for them, and they'll come in, with a little bit of an edge, a little bit of a chip on the shoulder. Nobody likes us. Nobody believes in us. They got really mad at me last year after they blew a game, because, historically, we've gotten in trouble because in the olden days, Clemsoning was, stepping on a rake and hitting yourself in the face. And I know what you guys are saying. Oh, you're bringing that up again. No, I'm not, because now what Clemsoning is playing in big games and winning championships. That's Clemsoning. Wolfpacking is now, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Here's the opportunity to change that. And I think their defense is good enough that if Clemson doesn't just run up and down the field on them, it's not some cause for alarm for the Clemson offense.
Thank you, Rece. Appreciate your time.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
Reese.
guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
great,
Thanks, Reese.
great
Have
weekend.
fun tomorrow.
We will, always. Thanks, guys. Take care.